I had 3 days to produce a husband or lose everything my family had built over 3 generations: our estate, our business, our name. My grandfather's will was explicit: inherit the family fortune only if married by my 25th birthday, which happened to fall on the exact day his will was being executed. No husband meant no inheritance, which meant my cousin Damien would claim everything and immediately sell it to cover his gambling debts. So I did what any desperate, rational woman would do when facing financial ruin and family destruction. I went to the Bridgeport auction house where desperate people bought and sold just about anything, and I purchased a husband. The auction was exactly as disturbing as it sounds. Men standing on platforms while auctioneers described their qualities like they were livestock, women bidding with the cold calculation of people buying property rather than partners. Most of the men were there voluntarily, selling themselves into contracted marriages to pay off debts or escape worse circumstances. Some looked resigned. Others looked relieved that someone was willing to pay for their partnership, even if that partnership was a legal fiction designed to satisfy inheritance requirements. I had exactly $50,000, my life savings, everything I'd managed to keep separate from the family accounts my grandfather controlled until his death. It wasn't much compared to some of the bids I was hearing, but it was all I had. I needed someone presentable enough to convince the lawyers executing the will that this was a real marriage, but not so expensive that I couldn't afford him. Someone who would play the role of devoted husband for exactly as long as necessary to secure my inheritance, then accept a generous divorce settlement and disappear from my life. The first few men were either too expensive or too obviously unsuitable. One was actively drunk on the auction platform. Another couldn't stop leering at the female bidders. A third looked like he'd murder me in my sleep for the insurance money. Then they brought out number 7. He was different. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the kind of confidence that suggested he wasn't actually desperate despite being sold at auction. His eyes were amber gold and sharp with intelligence that made me think he was assessing the bidders as much as we were assessing him. He had long dark blonde hair pulled back, a scar across his left cheekbone that somehow made him more attractive rather than less, and the kind of presence that made every woman in the room sit up straighter. Lot 7, the auctioneer announced. Kurt Walter. Age 32. No criminal record. Contract negotiable up to 5 years. Starting bid, $20,000. I raised my paddle before I could talk myself out of it. Something about him felt right, like he was exactly what I needed even though I couldn't articulate why. $20,000, I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. Another woman bid $25,000. I countered with $30,000. The bidding war escalated quickly. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd noticed that Kurt Walter was significantly more impressive than the other men being auctioned. We reached $45,000, and I was running out of money. I had exactly $5,000 left in my account. If I bid at all, I'd have no safety net, no emergency fund, nothing left if this plan failed. But if I didn't bid it, I'd lose everything anyway when Damien inherited the estate. $50,000, I said, my heart pounding. Final bid. Silence. The other bidders were assessing whether he was worth more than $50,000 for what was essentially a contract marriage. Apparently, they decided he wasn't. Sold, the auctioneer declared. Lot 7 to bidder 42, for $50,000. Congratulations on your purchase. Kurt Walter's eyes found mine across the auction hall, and I saw something flash in them: surprise, curiosity, maybe amusement. Like he was entertained that I'd just bought him. I walked up to finalize the paperwork, my hands shaking slightly as I signed documents that made Kurt Walter legally obligated to marry me within 72 hours and remain married for a minimum of 1 year unless both parties agreed to earlier termination. Congratulations, the auction coordinator said with false cheer. You can meet your purchase in the consultation room to discuss terms. The consultation room was small and private, designed for new couples to negotiate the specifics of their contracted arrangement. Kurt was already there, looking significantly less like property and more like a predator assessing potential threat. So, he said, his voice deeper than I'd expected. You just spent $50,000 on a husband you know nothing about. That's either very brave or very stupid. I'm curious which. Desperate, I corrected, sitting across from him and trying to project confidence I absolutely didn't feel. I have 3 days to produce a husband or lose my family's estate to my cousin who'll destroy everything my grandfather built. You were the most presentable option at the auction who I could actually afford. Presentable. He repeated the word like it was amusing. Is that what you're calling it? You're not drunk, you're not obviously a criminal, and you don't look like you'll murder me for insurance money. That's the best I could hope for given the circumstances. I met his golden eyes directly. I need you to play the role of devoted husband for exactly as long as it takes to satisfy the inheritance requirements. Probably a year. Maybe less if the lawyers are satisfied sooner. In exchange, you'll live in comfort at the estate, have access to everything you need, and receive a generous settlement when we divorce. It's a business arrangement, nothing personal, nothing complicated, just a mutually beneficial contract. And if I want it to be personal? Kurt asked, leaning forward slightly. If I decide I'm interested in more than just playing a role? Then you'll be disappointed, because this is strictly business. I'm not looking for romance or a relationship. I'm looking for a legal husband who can help me save my family's legacy. Can you do that, or did I waste $50,000? He studied me for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. Then he smiled, slow, predatory smile that made my stomach flip in ways that absolutely weren't appropriate for a business transaction. I can do that, he said. But fair warning, I'm very good at playing roles. You might have trouble remembering this as pretend. I'll manage. I'm excellent at separating business from personal. We'll see. He stood, extending his hand to seal our agreement. Looking forward to being your husband, Mrs. Walter. It's going to be Mr. Lopez, I corrected, shaking his hand and trying to ignore how warm his skin was. You're taking my name, since this is my inheritance we're protecting. Even better. I've always wanted to try being someone else. The way he said it made me think there was a story there, something about Kurt Walter's past that had led him to an auction where he sold himself into contract marriage. But I didn't ask. This was business. His history didn't matter as long as he could play the role of devoted husband convincingly enough to fool inheritance lawyers. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't discover until far too late to back out, was that I hadn't just purchased a convenient husband at auction. I'd accidentally bought the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, who'd been hunting for the criminals running the auction house and had gone undercover as merchandise to infiltrate their operation. I'd bought a king. I'd paid $50,000 for a wolf whose actual net worth was approximately $500 million. And he decided that keeping up the charade of being my purchased husband was significantly more entertaining than revealing his identity and watching me die of humiliation. This was going to be a disaster. Or the best thing that ever happened to me. Possibly both. She bought a husband at auction to save her inheritance. But Kurt Walter isn't actually a desperate man selling himself for money. He's the Alpha King going undercover to bust a criminal operation. Now, he's decided playing her purchased husband is more fun than revealing the truth. What happens when she finds out the man she bought for $50,000 is actually worth $500 million? And what happens when the auction house criminals realize they just sold the Alpha King to a random woman? Hit that subscribe button because this fake marriage is about to become very real, and there's a criminal conspiracy that's going to try to kill them both when the truth comes out. Plus, will she be more angry that he lied or more embarrassed that she literally bought a king? The Lopez estate looked different through the eyes of someone who'd almost lost it. I stood on the front steps 3 days after the wedding, legal documents proving my inheritance tucked safely in my bag, and tried to process that I'd actually succeeded. The estate was mine. The business was mine. 3 generations of family legacy secured because I'd been desperate enough to buy a husband at auction. Said husband was currently unloading his belongings from a car the auction house had provided. Not much, just 2 bags and a worn leather jacket that looked like it had seen better days. Everything about Kurt Walter suggested a man who'd been living rough before selling himself into contract marriage. "Is this really necessary?" Kurt asked, gesturing at the estate. "Moving in together? I thought we'd agreed on separate residences." "That was before my cousin Damien hired investigators to prove our marriage is fraudulent," I said, unlocking the front door. "If we're living separately, it looks like exactly what it is, a contracted arrangement to satisfy inheritance requirements. We need to appear as genuine married couple, which means cohabitation." Cohabitation. He tested the word. "Is that what we're calling it?" "What would you call it?" "Playing house. Very expensive, very complicated playing house." Kurt followed me inside, his gaze tracking over the estate's interior with the kind of attention that suggested he was cataloging everything. "This is what you paid $50,000 to protect. It's impressive. It's home. 3 generations of Lopez family history. My grandfather built the business from nothing. My father expanded it, and I've been managing operations since I was 22. Damien would have sold everything within a month to cover his gambling debts." I gestured toward the stairs. "Your room is on the 2nd floor. Private bathroom, space for your things. We're maintaining separate bedrooms for now." "For now?" Kurt's eyebrow raised. "That implies eventual change. It implies we reassess based on how aggressive Damien's investigation becomes. If he starts surveilling the house, we may need to share a bedroom to maintain the illusion. But for now, separate spaces." I needed boundaries. This man was essentially a stranger I'd purchased. Giving him too much access too quickly felt dangerous. Kurt seemed to understand my hesitation. "Separate spaces work for me. Though I should probably know more about you than just your financial desperation if we're going to convince investigators this marriage is real." "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Family history, business operations, what you like for breakfast, whether you're a morning person or a night owl. The details that actual spouses know about each other." Kurt set his bags down, giving me his full attention. "I'm good at playing roles, but I need information to work with." So I told him about growing up on the estate, about my grandfather's traditional values clashing with my independence, about learning the family business despite his belief that women weren't suited for commercial operations, about my father's death 5 years ago, about being left alone to manage everything while my grandfather slowly declined. "He wrote that will specifically to force me to marry," I admitted. "He thought I was too independent, too focused on business, too unwilling to accept that I needed a husband. This was his final attempt to control my life from beyond the grave. And instead of accepting loss of inheritance, you bought a husband at auction. That's either brilliant problem-solving or spectacular stubbornness." Kurt's tone suggested he approved of both options. "What happens after the year is up? When the will's requirements are satisfied. We divorce quietly. You receive your settlement, 50,000 plus living expenses, and a bonus if Damien's investigation doesn't discover anything problematic, and we go our separate ways. Clean, simple, mutually beneficial." "You've thought this through." "I've had a year to plan since my grandfather died. This was always the backup option if legal challenges to the will failed." I met his amber eyes directly. "I need you to understand. This is temporary. I'm not looking for actual husband or real marriage. Just legal arrangement that lets me keep what's mine." "Understood. Though I have to ask, why not just marry someone you actually knew? Friend, colleague, someone you had existing relationship with?" "Because anyone I knew would have expectations beyond the contract. Would think this might become real, would develop feelings I couldn't reciprocate, would be hurt when the divorce happened. You're a stranger. You know this is business. That makes it cleaner." I paused. "Why were you at the auction? What made you desperate enough to sell yourself into contract marriage?" Kurt's expression shifted, something guarded appearing briefly before he controlled it. "Debts. Bad investments. The usual story of someone who needs money quickly and has limited options. The auction house pays immediately, The contracts are legally binding, and it's more dignified than some alternatives. What alternatives? You don't want to know. The way he said it suggested actual darkness, experience with truly desperate situations that made auction marriages look appealing by comparison. I didn't push. His past wasn't my business as long as it didn't interfere with our arrangement. The first week established a routine. Kurt was surprisingly easy to live with, quiet, respectful of boundaries, helpful around the estate without being intrusive. He asked intelligent questions about the family business, remembered details from our conversations, and played the role of devoted husband perfectly when we needed to appear in public. "Your cousin is watching the house," Kurt observed one morning over breakfast. Black sedan, 2 occupants, parked at the corner for the past 3 hours. Professional surveillance. "How did you—" I stopped. "You noticed that from the second-floor window?" "I noticed things." Occupational habit. Kurt's attention remained on his coffee. "They're documenting our routines, looking for evidence that we're not actually living as married couple. Then we need to give them evidence to the contrary. Public affection, shared activities, the appearance of genuine relationships." The thought made me uncomfortable, but necessary discomfort was better than losing the inheritance. "How public?" "Damien's hosting a family dinner next week. He invited both of us. Wants to scrutinize our marriage personally. We'll need to be convincing." "Convincing I can do." Kurt's smile was predatory. "Though you might want to prepare yourself for your husband being very attentive in public. If we're performing, I perform thoroughly. Just don't make it so obvious it looks fake. Trust me." The dinner was exactly as uncomfortable as I'd anticipated. Damien had invited extended family, old friends, and several business associates, all of them curious about my sudden marriage to a man none of them had ever met. "So, Kurt," Damien said with false friendliness, "how did you and Vivian meet? She's been remarkably secretive about your courtship." Kurt's hand found mine under the table. Warm, steady, grounding. "We met through mutual connections. Vivian was handling some business matters, I was consulting on similar issues, and we discovered we had compatible interests." "Consulting." Damien repeated the word skeptically. "What kind of consulting?" "Risk assessment. Security operations. The kind of work that doesn't advertise publicly." Kurt's tone suggested the conversation was boring him. "But we're not here to discuss my career. We're here to celebrate family, yes." "Of course. Though I am curious about the timeline, you married quite quickly. Almost like Vivian was desperate to satisfy grandfather's will requirements before her birthday." "We married quickly because when you find the right person, waiting is pointless." Kurt's arm moved around my shoulders, pulling me closer. "I'm aware some family members question the timing. But I assure you, our marriage is completely legitimate." "I'm sure it is." Damien's expression suggested he believed the opposite. "Though it does seem convenient that Vivian found a husband literally days before her birthday. Makes one wonder if this is genuine marriage or business arrangement designed to circumvent the will." "Careful," Kurt said, his voice dropping to something more dangerous. "You're implying my wife married me fraudulently. That's an insult to both of us." The table went silent. Kurt's presence had shifted, less purchased husband playing a role, more something predatory and powerful that made even Damien back down instinctively. "I'm not implying anything," Damien said carefully. "Just noting the convenient timing." "Note it quietly." Kurt's attention returned to me, his expression softening. "Should we leave? I think we've satisfied the family obligation." "Yes. Let's go home." In the car, I finally released the breath I'd been holding. "That was intense. The way you shut down Damien. Where did that come from?" "I don't tolerate disrespect toward people I'm protecting. You're my wife, contract or not. That means defending you from insults." Kurt's hands were steady on the steering wheel, though I may have been more aggressive than necessary. "Sorry if I overstepped." "You didn't overstep. You were perfect, protective but not violent, defending our marriage without making a scene." That's exactly what we needed. I paused. Though there was a moment where you seemed genuinely angry. Like you weren't just playing a role. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I actually dislike your cousin and his transparent attempts to undermine you. Kurt glanced at me. Is that acceptable? Or should I be more emotionally distant? It's acceptable. More than acceptable. I was starting to realize that Kurt Walter was significantly more complex than I'd expected when I'd purchased him at auction. Thank you for defending me tonight. That's what husbands do. Even purchased ones. 2 months into our arrangement, the boundaries I'd carefully established were starting to blur. Kurt had become more than just a contracted husband. He was friend, business advisor, and increasingly someone I actually enjoyed being around rather than just tolerating for the sake of the inheritance. Damien's investigators found nothing, I told Kurt one evening. Their report says we appear to be genuinely married, cohabiting, affectionate in public, financially entwined. They found no evidence of fraud. So, we're in the clear? The inheritance secure?
For now.
Though Damien's not giving up. He's filed a lawsuit claiming the will is invalid because it discriminates based on marital status. That could take months to resolve. I sank into the couch, exhausted from another day of legal meetings.
I'm sorry.
I know you signed up for 1 year of this, not ongoing legal battles. I signed up for whatever was necessary to help you keep the estate. Legal battles are just part of the arrangement. Kurt sat beside me, close enough that I could feel his warmth. Besides, I'm not in a hurry to leave. Living here is comfortable. You're good company. And taking down your cousin is surprisingly satisfying. You really dislike him. I really dislike wolves who use legal manipulation to steal from family members. It's personal prejudice. The way Kurt said it suggested actual experience, something in his past that made Damien's behavior particularly offensive. Do you want to talk about it? Your past. Not particularly. But I appreciate you asking. Kurt's hand found mine, not performance for invisible investigators, just genuine comfort. How are you holding up? This has been stressful.
I'm managing.
Better than I expected, actually. Having you here helps. Feeling like I'm not facing this alone makes everything more bearable. I squeezed his fingers. Thank you for that. For being more than just a contracted husband playing a role. You're welcome. Though I should warn you, I'm getting too comfortable with this arrangement. Starting to forget it's temporary. Is that a problem? Depends. Are you forgetting it's temporary too? I should have said no. Should have reinforced the boundaries, reminded both of us that this was a business arrangement ending in divorce. Instead, I said, maybe. Is that a problem? Only if we're not both on the same page about what comes next. What comes next? Kurt turned to face me fully, his amber eyes intense. That depends on whether you want to renegotiate our contract. Change it from temporary business arrangement to something more permanent. My heart was racing. You want to stay married? Actually married, not just for show. I want the option to explore whether this could become real. No pressure, no expectations, just permission to stop pretending this is purely business and admit we're both developing actual feelings. Kurt's voice was careful, but only if you want that too. If you'd rather maintain the original arrangement, I'll respect that boundary. I should have maintained the boundary. Should have protected myself from the complication of real feelings in a purchase marriage. Instead, I kissed him. Kurt responded immediately, his hands gentle despite the obvious desire, his kiss conveying everything he hadn't said out loud. Want, hope, genuine care that had nothing to do with contracts or inheritance. When we finally pulled apart, I said, renegotiation accepted. Let's see if this can become real. That's either the best decision you've ever made or a disaster waiting to happen. Probably both. I'm good at complicated decisions. That's why I like you. What neither of us knew was that the auction house criminals had finally realized who Kurt Walter actually was. That they were planning to eliminate the evidence of their mistake. that our lives were about to become significantly more dangerous than inheritance disputes and family lawsuits. But for that moment, we were just two people who'd found something genuine in the middle of a purchased marriage. And that was enough. 3 months into our marriage, Kurt started acting strange. Not suspicious exactly, but distracted, like he was managing something beyond just our contracted arrangement. He'd disappear for hours claiming errands, return with no explanation of where he'd been, and occasionally I'd catch him on phone calls that ended the moment I entered the room. "Is everything okay?" I asked one evening after he'd returned from another mysterious absence. "You've been distant lately." "Everything's fine. Just handling some personal business." Kurt's deflection was smooth but unconvincing. "Nothing you need to worry about. We're married. Even if it started as business arrangement, we're supposed to be partners now. If something's wrong, nothing's wrong." His tone was final, closing the conversation. "Trust me, Vivian. If there was something you needed to know, I'd tell you." I wanted to believe him, but the secretive phone calls, the unexplained absences, the way he seemed to be constantly assessing our surroundings like he expected threats, it all suggested Kurt was hiding something significant. Maybe he'd lied about his past. Maybe the debts and bad investments story was cover for something darker. Maybe I'd purchased a husband with complications I hadn't anticipated. The truth came out in the worst possible way. I'd been meeting with my lawyers about Damien's ongoing lawsuit when I'd forgotten my phone. I returned to the estate unexpectedly and heard Kurt in his office, speaking with an intensity I'd never heard before. "No, we can't move yet. The auction house suspects something, but they don't have confirmation. If I break cover now, we lose months of investigation."
Pause.
"I understand the risks. I'm managing them. Vivian is safe. She's completely uninvolved in the criminal operation." Longer pause. I said, "I'm handling it. Trust my judgment." I stood frozen outside the office door, processing what I'd just heard. Investigation. Criminal operation. Break cover. Kurt wasn't just my purchased husband. He was investigating something, using our marriage as cover for whatever operation he was actually running. I pushed open the door without knocking. Kurt's head snapped up, his expression shifting from focused intensity to carefully controlled neutrality. "Vivian, I wasn't expecting you back." "Who are you?" I interrupted. "And don't say Kurt Walter. That call made it very clear you're not just a desperate man who sold himself at auction. So who are you really, and what investigation are you using my marriage to cover?" Kurt was silent for a long moment, calculation visible in his amber eyes. Then he sighed, sound of someone making a difficult decision. "Close the door. I'll tell you everything, but we need privacy." I closed the door with hands that weren't quite steady.
I'm listening.
"My name isn't Kurt Walter. It's Kurt Thorne. I'm the Alpha King of the Northern Territories." He said it flatly, like announcing he was royalty was casual statement rather than earth-shattering revelation. "I've been investigating the Bridgeport auction house for criminal operations, money laundering, trafficking, fraud, blackmail. I went undercover as someone willing to sell himself into contract marriage to infiltrate their network from the inside." I stared at him, processing words that didn't make sense. Alpha King. Undercover investigation. Everything I'd believed about Kurt Walter was fiction. "You're lying," I said, even though his expression suggested he wasn't. "The Alpha King of the Northern Territories you can't be." "I can prove it." Kurt pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then handed it to me. "Official identification. Royal seal. Background check that will confirm everything I'm telling you." The phone showed government identification with Kurt's face, Royal Seal of the Northern Territories, and title that read, "Kurt Thorne, Alpha King, ruler of the Northern Territories and sovereign of the 5 kingdoms." My hands started shaking. "You're actually the Alpha King. You're actually Moon Goddess. I bought the Alpha King at auction. I paid $50,000 for a king. In fairness, you didn't know. And I chose to maintain the cover rather than revealing my identity."
Why? My voice was rising.
Why would you let me believe you were a desperate man selling himself for money? Why go through with the marriage instead of just arresting everyone at the auction house? Because I wasn't finished with the investigation. I needed more time to gather evidence, identify everyone involved in the criminal network. Your purchase complicated things, but it also provided perfect cover. Married man living at his wife's estate, no connection to the auction house beyond the initial transaction. Kurt stood carefully, like approaching a spooked animal. I know this is shocking. I should have told you sooner. But breaking cover would have compromised months of work. So you just lied to me? For 3 months? Pretended to be someone you're not while I stopped, horror washing over me. Oh, moon goddess.
The things I said.
The way I treated you. I've been ordering around the Alpha King like he's your purchased husband who you paid for? Because that's exactly what the contract said. Kurt's tone was gentle despite my panic. Vivian, you didn't do anything wrong. You treated me like we agreed you would, as business partner fulfilling a contract. The deception is on me, not you. Your royalty. Your worth. What's your actual net worth? Approximately $500 million in liquid assets. More if you count Kingdom Holdings. I sat down before my legs could give out. I paid $50,000 for someone worth $500 million. I've been budgeting grocery expenses for a king. I've been treating the Alpha King like he's my purchased help instead of exactly what I presented myself as. Kurt moved closer, kneeling in front of me, so we were at eye level. Everything between us is real, Vivian. The friendship, the growing feelings, the choice to make this marriage more than just a business arrangement. All of that is genuine regardless of what name I was using. I'm still the same person. I'm just also the Alpha King. You're not the same person. Kurt Walter was a desperate man selling himself at auction. Kurt Thorne is royalty conducting an undercover investigation.
Those aren't the same.
They are to me. The title is just role I play for kingdom responsibilities. With you, I got to just be Kurt, the man you chose, the husband you negotiated with, the person you were starting to care about beyond the contract. That's more real than anything I do as Alpha King. His hands found mine carefully.
I'm sorry I lied.
I'm sorry I let this go on so long without telling you the truth. But I'm not sorry about being your husband, real or purchased. That's the only part of the situation I don't regret. I wanted to be angry. Wanted to rage at him for the deception, for letting me make a fool of myself for 3 months, for using our marriage as cover for his investigation. Instead, I just felt tired. What happens now? Now that I know the truth? That depends on you. I can leave and the cover, and you keep the estate since the marriage was legally valid regardless of my identity. Or I can stay, we continue as we were, and I finish my investigation while we figure out whether this marriage can survive the truth. Kurt's expression was carefully neutral. Your choice. I'll respect whatever you decide. If you stay, the criminals you're investigating might realize who you are. That puts me in danger. I'll protect you. I've been doing it for 3 months without you knowing. I can continue doing it now that you're aware of the situation. And when the investigation is done, when you're not undercover anymore, what happens to us then? We decide if we want to stay married as ourselves instead of as our cover identities. If the answer is yes, you become Luna Queen of the Northern Territories. If no, we divorce quietly, and I make sure you're compensated far beyond our original contract. Kurt's voice was steady. But that's a future problem. Right now, I need to know if you want me to stay or go. I should have told him to leave. Should have protected myself from further complications, further lies, further revelations about who Kurt actually was. Instead, I said, stay. Finish your investigation. We'll figure out the rest later. You're sure? I'm sure that sending you away doesn't change what's already happened between us. I'm sure that I'd rather face whatever comes next with you here than alone. I met his eyes. Though you're going to need to actually tell me things from now on. No more secrets, no more mysterious disappearances. If we're doing this, I need honesty. Agreed. Complete honesty from now on. Kurt stood, pulling me up with him. Thank you for not throwing me out. I know discovering I'm the Alpha King is overwhelming. Overwhelming is understatement. I'm going to need time to process the fact that I literally bought a king at auction. I paused. Does this mean I'm technically married to royalty? Am I supposed to use titles when addressing you? God, no. Please continue calling me Kurt and treating me like your difficult husband. That's the only thing keeping me sane during this investigation. Your difficult purchased husband who you're paying $50,000 to play a role. Former purchased husband. Current husband who happens to also be the Alpha King but would really prefer you ignore that fact as much as possible. I'll try. Though it's going to be difficult now that I know you're secretly worth $500 million. Think of it as me being really dedicated to the undercover role. That's one way to describe lying to your wife for 3 months. In my defense, you didn't ask if I was secretly royalty when you purchased me. That's because secretly being royalty isn't a normal thing to check for during auction purchases. Despite everything, the shock, the betrayal, the absolute absurdity of learning I'd bought the Alpha King, I started laughing. Kurt joined me, and for a moment we were just two people who'd stumbled into the most ridiculous situation possible. This is insane, I said once I could breathe again. Everything about this situation is completely insane. Agreed. But it's our insanity, and we're going to make it work somehow. That's either optimistic or delusional. Probably both. Vivian just discovered her husband is the Alpha King. She bought him for $50,000 and he's worth $500 million. Plus, he's been using their marriage as cover for an undercover investigation into criminal operations. What happens now that the truth is out? Will she forgive the deception or kick him out? And what happens when the auction house criminals realize they accidentally sold the Alpha King? Hit subscribe because Chapter 3 covers Vivian adjusting to being married to royalty, the investigation getting dangerous, and the moment when the criminals figure out who Kurt really is. Also, is anyone else dying to know what happens when Damien discovers his cousin is married to the Alpha King? Adjusting to being married to the Alpha King was significantly harder than adjusting to being married to Kurt Walter. At least Kurt Walter had been straightforward, purchased a husband fulfilling a contract. Kurt Thorne came with complications I hadn't anticipated. I need to attend a kingdom function next week, Kurt said over breakfast 3 days after his revelation. It's expected that I bring my Luna Queen. That's you now. Technically, even though we haven't made the marriage public yet. Wait, I'm Luna Queen? Of the Northern Territories? The coffee I'd been drinking suddenly felt too hot. Since when? Since we got married. The moment I married you, you became Luna Queen by default. We've just been keeping it private until the investigation concludes. So for 3 months, I've been Luna Queen without knowing it. That's... I set down my coffee before I could drop it. Kurt, I can't be Luna Queen. I don't know anything about royal protocol, kingdom politics, any of it. I bought you at auction because I needed to satisfy an inheritance requirement, not because I wanted to rule 5 kingdoms. You're not ruling 5 kingdoms. I'm ruling them. You're just the Luna Queen, which is mostly ceremonial unless you choose to take on more active role. Kurt's tone suggested he was trying to be reassuring and failing. Though I understand this is overwhelming. I should have explained the implications when I revealed my identity. You think? My voice was rising again. I went from desperate woman buying a husband to Luna Queen of the Northern Territories in 3 months without anyone thinking to mention that detail? In fairness, you didn't ask. Because normal people don't need to ask if marrying someone makes them royalty. That's information that should be volunteered. You're right.
I'm sorry.
I've spent so long being the Alpha King that I forget other people aren't automatically aware of how royal marriages work. Kurt looked genuinely apologetic. What do you need from me to make this manageable? Information. Detailed information about what being Luna Queen actually means. what responsibilities I'm now committed to, what expectations exist that I've been accidentally violating for 3 months. You haven't been violating anything. Our marriage wasn't public, so there were no expectations to violate. Kurt pulled out his phone, making notes. I'll arrange for you to meet with my royal advisor. She can explain everything: protocol, responsibilities, public expectations, how to navigate kingdom politics. You'll have full support system to help you adjust. And the investigation? How does my suddenly being Luna Queen affect your undercover work? It doesn't. We maintain the cover. You're still Vivian Lopez, who married a man named Kurt Walter to satisfy your grandfather's will. No one outside my immediate circle knows I've been undercover, or that you're actually Luna Queen. As far as the auction house criminals are concerned, I'm still just purchased husband living at your estate. Until they find out the truth. Then what happens? Kurt's expression went dark. Then they try to eliminate the evidence of their mistake. Which is why we need to conclude the investigation before they realize who I am. How close are you to having enough evidence? Close. Another month, maybe 2, and we'll have everything we need to dismantle their entire operation and prosecute everyone involved. Kurt reached across the table, his hand finding mine. I know this is complicated. I know you didn't sign up for any of this when you bought me at auction. But I promise, once the investigation is done, once the criminals are arrested, we can figure out our marriage without the undercover operation complicating everything. And if I decide I don't want to be Luna Queen, if I want to just be Vivian Lopez running her family business, then we figure out how to make that work. Maybe you're Luna Queen publicly, but maintain private life that's separate from kingdom responsibilities. Maybe we keep the marriage quiet, and you never have to deal with royal protocol at all. Maybe we divorce, and you go back to your life without me in it. Kurt's voice was steady despite how much that last option clearly bothered him. I'm not going to force you into a role you never wanted. Your choice matters more than kingdom expectations. Even if choosing to leave means you don't have a Luna Queen? Even then, I'd rather have no Luna Queen than one who's miserable in the role. I believed him. That was the strange part. Despite the lies, despite the deception, I genuinely believed Kurt cared more about my well-being than about having appropriate royal spouse. I need time, I said finally. Time to process, time to meet with your advisor, time to figure out if I can actually be Luna Queen, or if I'm going to embarrass both of us at the first kingdom function. Take all the time you need. The investigation comes first anyway. We're not making the marriage public until the auction house criminals are arrested. Kurt squeezed my hand gently. And for what it's worth, I think you'll be excellent Luna Queen once you adjust. You're intelligent, capable, and you handle pressure better than most wolves I've met. Those qualities matter more than knowing which fork to use at formal dinners. There are multiple forks at formal dinners? Unfortunately, yes. But that's what advisors are for. Kurt's royal advisor arrived the next day, a stern beta woman named Helena, who looked at me with the kind of assessment that suggested she was cataloging every flaw. Luna Queen Vivian, she said with perfect formal bow. I'm honored to meet you and assist with your transition to royal responsibilities. I'm not sure I'm transitioning to anything yet, I said carefully. I'm still deciding if I'm capable of being Luna Queen. You're married to the Alpha King. That makes you Luna Queen regardless of whether you feel capable. Helena's tone was matter-of-fact rather than cruel. The question isn't whether you're Luna Queen, you are. The question is whether you'll embrace the role actively or maintain minimal involvement while Alpha King Kurt handles kingdom responsibilities alone. What does minimal involvement look like? Attending required formal functions, maintaining appropriate public image, supporting the Alpha King when necessary, but otherwise living your private life separate from kingdom politics. Helena pulled out extensive documentation. It's not uncommon for Luna Queens to take this approach, particularly when they married into royalty unexpectedly rather than being raised for the role. And active involvement? Taking on kingdom projects, engaging with the wolf population directly, working alongside the Alpha King on policy and governance. building your own political relationships and influence. Helena met my eyes directly. It's more work, but also more rewarding if you're interested in actually shaping the kingdom rather than just existing as a ceremonial figure. I thought about that, the difference between just existing as Kurt's wife versus actually contributing to kingdom governance. What did previous Luna queens typically choose? Most took active roles. The Northern Territories values strong Luna queens who participate in governance rather than just looking decorative at formal dinners. Helena paused. Though I should mention, you're in a unique position. Most Luna queens married alpha kings who'd been transparent about their identities from the start. You married an alpha king who was undercover and didn't tell you until 3 months later. That changes dynamics significantly. How so? It means you have leverage most Luna queens don't. Alpha King Kurt deceived you, used your marriage as cover for investigation, and revealed the truth only when caught. That's not behavior that demands unwavering loyalty and immediate embrace of royal duties. You can negotiate terms that work for you rather than just accepting traditional expectations. You're encouraging me to negotiate with the Alpha King? I'm encouraging you to protect your interests. Alpha King Kurt is my employer, but my primary duty is ensuring the Luna Queen's well-being and effectiveness. Right now, you're neither well nor effective. You're confused, overwhelmed, and feeling betrayed. We need to address those issues before we can even think about royal protocol training. Helena's directness was refreshing. What do you suggest? Honest conversation with Alpha King Kurt about what you want from this marriage, now that you know the truth. Not what he wants, not what the kingdom expects, what you want. Then we build a Luna Queen role around those wants rather than forcing you into predetermined expectations. And if what I want is to not be Luna Queen at all, then we make that happen while maintaining the political stability that comes from Alpha King Kurt being married. There are creative solutions if you're willing to explore them. Helena smiled slightly, first expression of warmth she'd shown. You're not trapped, Luna Queen Vivian. You have options. We just need to figure out which options you actually want to pursue. For the first time since learning Kurt's true identity, I felt like I could breathe properly. Thank you for being direct, for focusing on what I need. I appreciate that. That's my job. Now, shall we start with basic protocol training so you're prepared for the kingdom function next week? Or would you prefer to continue processing everything first? Let's start training. Sitting around processing just makes me more anxious. I'd rather learn what I need to know and deal with my feelings about it later. Practical approach. I approve. The kingdom function was exactly as overwhelming as I'd feared. Hundreds of wolves, all of them watching me with curiosity and judgment, all of them knowing I was Luna, Queen, even though I barely understood what that meant. Kurt stayed close, his hand on my back providing steady support. You're doing fine, he murmured during a break between formal introductions. Just breathe and remember, most of these wolves are more nervous about meeting you than you are about meeting them. I doubt that.
I'm terrified.
They're terrified you'll be a traditional Luna Queen who judges them harshly. You're terrified you'll embarrass yourself by using the wrong fork. Different fears, same intensity. Kurt's smile was reassuring. Besides, Helena says you've been learning protocol faster than expected. You're better prepared than you think. Helena's being kind. I'm a disaster waiting to happen. You're Luna Queen learning on the job. There's a difference. A visiting alpha approached, older wolf who moved with the confidence of someone used to power. Alpha King Kurt. And this must be your Luna Queen. I've heard interesting things about your marriage. Lord Revan, Kurt said with a kind of neutral politeness that suggested these two had history. This is my wife, Vivian. Vivian, Lord Revan oversees the Eastern Territories. Luna Queen Vivian. Revan's bow was technically correct, but somehow condescending. I understand you married Alpha King Kurt quite suddenly. Some might say suspiciously quickly given the timing with your family inheritance requirements. My cheeks heated, but Kurt's hand tightened on my back, silent support. My marriage timing is no one's business except my wife's and mine, I said, channeling every bit of Lopez's business negotiation experience. Though I appreciate your concern for my family's legal matters. Of course. Though I do wonder how someone from a minor commercial family ended up married to the Alpha King. One hears rumors about auction houses and desperate arrangements. He knew. Moon Goddess. Somehow Lord Revan knew about the auction house. One hears a lot of rumors in royal circles, Kurt said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Most of them are baseless speculation meant to entertain bored wolves. I'd hate for you to damage your reputation by spreading unverified gossip, Lord Revan. Naturally. I would never dream of spreading gossip. Revan's smile suggested the opposite. I'm simply curious about your Luna Queen's background. Surely that's reasonable. What's reasonable is respecting my wife's privacy and not questioning her worthiness based on rumors. Kurt's alpha dominance began radiating, subtle but unmistakable. If you have legitimate concerns about kingdom governance, address them through proper channels. If you're just fishing for gossip to entertain yourself, do it somewhere else. Are we clear? Revan looked between us, calculation visible in his expression. Then he bowed with false respect. Perfectly clear, Alpha King Kurt. Luna Queen Vivian. Enjoy your evening. After he left, I finally released the breath I'd been holding. He knows about the auction house. How does he know? Because he's probably one of the people involved in the criminal operation I've been investigating. The auction house has connections throughout noble circles. That's how they've operated undetected for so long. Kurt guided me toward a private corner. I should have warned you this might happen.
I'm sorry.
What do we do? If he knows, if he tells people. He won't tell people because it would reveal how he learned the information, which would expose his connection to the criminal operation. He's fishing, seeing if he can rattle us into confirming his suspicions. As long as we deny everything and maintain our cover, he has no proof. How long before they realize you're not actually Kurt Walter? Before they figure out you're the Alpha King investigating them? I don't know. But we need to accelerate the investigation. Gather enough evidence to make arrests before someone like Revan puts the pieces together and the criminals try to eliminate us both. They'd really try to kill us? Just to cover up that they accidentally sold you at auction. They try to kill us to prevent prosecution for money laundering, trafficking, fraud, and blackmail. The auction mistake is just one crime among many. Kurt pulled me closer, his arms protective. But I'm not going to let them touch you. I promise. Whatever happens with the investigation, you're safe. I wanted to believe him. But Lord Revan's knowing smile had made one thing very clear. We were running out of time before everything exploded. The investigation accelerated rapidly after the kingdom functioned. Kurt spent more time with his team, gathering evidence, coordinating with law enforcement, and preparing for the arrests that would dismantle the auction house's criminal network. I spent more time with Helena, learning Luna Queen protocols while also helping Kurt's investigation by providing insight into business operations that might be relevant to the money laundering charges. You're good at this, Kurt observed one evening after I'd spent hours analyzing financial documents. The investigation work, you see patterns quickly. I've been managing business operations since I was 22. Financial analysis is basically the same whether it's legitimate commerce or criminal enterprise. I rubbed my tired eyes. Though I have to admit, being useful for the investigation makes being Luna Queen feel less overwhelming. At least I'm contributing something beyond just looking appropriate at formal dinners. You contribute more than you realize. The nobles respect competence, and you've been demonstrating plenty of that. Kurt moved behind my chair, his hands settling on my shoulders with gentle pressure. You're tense. When's the last time you actually relaxed? Relaxing seems irresponsible when criminals are plotting to kill us. Relaxing is necessary when you're going to burn out from constant stress. His hands worked on the knots in my shoulders, and I couldn't suppress a groan at how good it felt. You've been working nonstop for weeks. You're allowed to take breaks. So are you. When's the last time you relaxed? Touché. Kurt's massage continued, his touch careful and professional despite the growing tension between us. Though I have to admit, being married to you has been the most relaxed I've felt in years, investigation notwithstanding. It's nice having a partner who knows the real me instead of just seeing the alpha king. Even though I bought you at auction and ordered you around for 3 months before learning your royalty, especially because of that. Do you know how many people actually treat me like a normal person instead of performing for the Alpha King? You're one of maybe 3 wolves who've seen me as Kurt rather than as my title. That's depressing. That's royalty. Everyone wants something, everyone's calculating advantage, everyone's performing their best version of loyal subject. Kurt's hands stilled on my shoulders. Being with you, even when you thought I was purchased husband, was the first time in years I got to just exist without all that weight. I turned in my chair to face him. Is that why you didn't tell me the truth sooner? Because you liked being treated like Kurt Walter instead of like the Alpha King? Partially. Though mostly I didn't tell you because breaking cover would have compromised the investigation, and I was selfishly enjoying our arrangement too much to end it prematurely. Kurt knelt, so we were at eye level. I know the deception hurt you. I know you're still processing the betrayal. But I need you to understand, everything between us is real. The friendship, the growing feelings, the choice to make this marriage more than just business arrangement. That's all genuine regardless of what name I was using. Even the part where you said you were falling for me, while lying about your identity. Especially that part. I'm not falling for you because you're convenient cover for my investigation. I'm falling for you because you're intelligent, capable, funny, and you treat me like I'm worth more than just my title and power. Kurt's hands cupped my face gently. I love you, Vivian. Not as Luna Queen, not as useful a partner for kingdom governance, as you. The woman who bought me at auction because she was desperate to save her family's legacy. The woman who negotiates everything like it's business deal because emotional vulnerability scares her. The woman who's been learning royal protocol at speed that impresses even Helena, while also helping with a criminal investigation. I love all of it. All of you. My throat was tight. You can't just say things like that. Not when I'm still angry about the lying. I can say them because they're true. You can be angry about the deception, and I can still love you. Both things are possible simultaneously. Kurt stood, pulling me up with him. I'm not asking you to forgive me immediately or to forget that I lied for 3 months. I'm just asking you to believe that the feelings are real even if the circumstances around them are complicated. This is the worst time to have this conversation. We're in the middle of investigation, criminals are hunting us, and my cousin is still trying to prove our marriage is fraudulent. We have bigger problems than discussing feelings. Feelings are never the wrong time to discuss. They're just inconvenient sometimes. Kurt's smile was rueful. But you're right that we have more immediate concerns. Like the fact that my team identified Lord Revan as one of the auction house's primary investors, and he's probably already warned them about my investigation. The mood shift was jarring. He warned them? When? Probably during or immediately after the kingdom function. We've been monitoring his communications. He contacted 3 known associates of the auction house leadership within hours of meeting you. Kurt released me reluctantly, pulling up files on his laptop.
They're planning something.
We're not sure what yet, but the communications suggest they're preparing to eliminate evidence and disappear before arrests can be made. Which means they're going to try to eliminate us. The evidence that they sold the Alpha King. Likely, yes. Which is why I'm increasing security around the estate and assigning personal guards to you anytime you leave the property. I don't need personal guards. You absolutely need personal guards. You're Luna Queen married to the Alpha King who's investigating criminals with extensive resources and motivation to make us both disappear. Guards aren't optional. Kurt's tone left no room for argument. I'm not losing you because you're too stubborn to accept protection.
Fine. Guards.
But they'd better be discreet. I don't want them interfering with my business operations. They'll be invisible unless threats emerge. You'll barely notice them. I noticed them immediately. The two wolves who shadowed me everywhere, the increased security at the estate, the way Kurt's team monitored all communications to and from our property. It was suffocating and necessary simultaneously. I hate this, I told Helena during one of our protocol sessions. Feeling like prisoner in my own home because criminals might be plotting murder. Better to feel like prisoner temporarily than actually be murdered, Helena said pragmatically. Though I understand the frustration. Alpha King Kurt tends toward overprotective when people he cares about are threatened. Is that a royal trait or a Kurt trait? Both. The role requires protecting kingdom and its people. His personal inclination is to protect individuals he loves. With you, both motivations are active, which makes him insufferable about security protocols. You seem to have strong opinions about the Alpha King's protective tendencies. I've worked for him for 8 years. I've seen him go through several relationships where his protectiveness drove partners away. They wanted independent lives, he wanted them safe. The relationships ended badly. Helena looked at me directly. You're the first partner I've seen who understands that his protectiveness comes from love rather than control. That's rare and valuable. I understand it because I've been managing a business where safety protocols matter. I'm used to balancing independence with necessary security measures. I paused. Though I'll admit, having it applied to me personally is more frustrating than applying it to others. That's why you and Alpha King Kurt work well together. You both understand security as practical necessity rather than as limitation on freedom. That compatibility will serve you well if you choose to stay married beyond the investigation. Still processing whether I want to stay married to someone who lied to me for 3 months. Understandable. Though I'll note, you've been calling him Kurt instead of Alpha King Kurt. That suggests you're distinguishing between the man and the role, which indicates you're processing toward forgiveness rather than away from it. Helena was irritatingly perceptive. Maybe. Doesn't mean I'm ready to fully trust him again. Trust rebuilds slowly. Give it time. The attack came 2 weeks later, during a business meeting I'd insisted on attending despite Kurt's protests. I was meeting with suppliers at a neutral location, guards stationed discreetly around the building, when the explosion happened. Not a real explosion. Carefully constructed sound effect designed to cause panic and scatter the guards. But effective nonetheless. In the chaos, someone grabbed me from behind, arm around my throat, voice in my ear saying, "You're coming with us, Luna Queen. We have questions about your husband's investigation." I reacted on instinct, elbow to the ribs, stamp on the foot, twist away using the self-defense moves Kurt had insisted on teaching me during our purchased husband phase. My attacker stumbled but recovered quickly, pulling a knife. That's when my guards appeared. The discreet security Kurt had assigned materializing with speed that suggested they'd been anticipating exactly this scenario. They had the attacker disarmed and restrained within seconds. "Luna Queen, are you hurt?" one of them asked, scanning me for injuries.
"I've fine."
Shaken but fine. My hands were trembling with adrenaline. Who was that? Auction house operative. They've been tracking you, waiting for opportunity to grab you for interrogation about Alpha King Kurt's investigation. The guard spoke into his radio, presumably updating Kurt about the situation. "We're evacuating you to the safe house. Alpha King Kurt is meeting us there." The safe house was a secure location Kurt's team used for operations, armed guards, reinforced walls, communications equipment that looked like it belonged in a military command center. Kurt was there within 20 minutes, fury and relief warring on his face as he pulled me into his arms. "They grabbed you," he said into my hair. "They actually got close enough to grab you despite all our security. Your guard stopped them before they could actually take me. The security worked." I pulled back to look at him.
"I'm okay, Kurt."
Scared but okay. "You shouldn't have been in that situation at all. I should have insisted you stay at the estate. I had a business meeting that couldn't be postponed. You can't keep me locked up forever just because criminals are targeting us." I cupped his face, making him focus on me rather than his self-recrimination. "We knew they'd try something. This was expected. And I survived because your training and security protocols worked exactly as designed. Next time you might not survive. Next time they might be faster, or my guards might be delayed, or something else could go wrong. Kurt's hands were shaking slightly. I can't lose you, Vivian. I can't watch another person I love be destroyed because of my investigation work. Another person? I caught the phrasing. Who else did you lose? Kurt was silent for a long moment. Then, my sister. 10 years ago. She was killed by criminals I was investigating. They targeted her to force me to stop. I didn't stop, and she paid for my persistence with her life. I'm not letting that happen again. The grief in his voice made my chest ache. I'm not your sister. I'm your wife, your partner, and I'm actively choosing to be part of this investigation despite the dangers. You're not responsible for protecting me from consequences I've accepted. I'm absolutely responsible for protecting you. That's what mates do. They protect each other from threats. Then let me protect you too. Let me be partner in this instead of just someone you're safeguarding. I can help, Kurt. I can contribute beyond just being victim you're rescuing. You already contribute. The financial analysis, the protocol learning, the way you handle nobles, and investigation work simultaneously. I mean actively. I mean being involved in the operation beyond just reviewing documents. Let me help catch these bastards who try to kidnap me today.
Kurt studied me carefully.
You want to be bait. You want to use yourself to draw them out. I want to finish this before someone actually does get killed. If using me as bait accomplishes that, yes. I met his eyes directly. I'm not helpless. I'm not going to break under pressure, and I'm capable of handling dangers if I'm properly prepared and supported. Trust me enough to let me help. This is a terrible idea. Probably. But it's also the fastest way to end the investigation and keep both of us safe long-term. I squeezed his hands. I love you too. Even though you lied, even though you're overprotective, even though being married to the Alpha King is infinitely more complicated than being married to Kurt Walter. I love you, and I want to end this threat so we can figure out our marriage without criminals trying to kill us. You're sure?
I'm terrified.
But also sure. I managed to smile. Besides, you've been training me for 3 months in self-defense and security protocols without realizing it. Might as well put that training to use. If anything happens to you during this operation, then you'll have chosen a really reckless Luna Queen and learned an important lesson about trusting your wife's judgment. I pulled him closer. Nothing's going to happen. We're going to catch the criminals, dismantle their network, and move on with our lives. Together. Kurt kissed me, desperate, fierce, full of fear and love and reluctant agreement that using me as bait was tactically sound even if it was emotionally devastating. Together, he agreed. But if you die because of this plan, I'm never forgiving you. That seems fair. The criminals tried to kidnap Vivian, but Kurt's security stopped them, and now she's decided to become active bait to draw out the conspirators. Plus, she finally told Kurt she loves him despite the lying, and they're planning to take down the entire criminal network together. Hit subscribe because Chapter 5 covers the operation, the final confrontation with the auction house criminals, and whether Vivian survives being human bait. Also, Damien is about to discover his cousin is Luna Queen, and it's going to be glorious. Planning to use myself as bait for criminals who'd already tried to kidnap me once was significantly more terrifying when I had to actually do it rather than just agreeing to the concept in theory. You don't have to do this, Kurt said for the 15th time in 2 days. We can find another way to draw them out. There is no other way. They want me, the Luna Queen whose existence proves they sold the Alpha King. I'm the evidence they need to eliminate. I checked the wire I was wearing for the 10th time, making sure it was secure. Your team will have eyes on me the entire time. The moment they make their move, you'll intervene. It's a solid plan. Solid plans still go wrong. People die on solid plans. Then make sure I'm not one of them. I met his eyes, seeing the fear he was trying to hide. I trust you, Kurt. Trust your training, Trust your team. Trust that you'll get to me before anything permanent happens. Can you trust me enough to let me do this? I trust you. I just don't trust the criminals not to be more desperate and violent than we're anticipating. That's why I have this. I touch the panic button embedded in my bracelet. One press and your entire team converges on my location within seconds. Plus, I have the self-defense training you've been drilling into me for months. I'm as prepared as I can be. I still hate this plan. So do I. But I hate living in fear more. The operation was straightforward. I'd attend a charity gala where several suspected auction house associates would be present. I'd make myself visible, accessible, an easy target for abduction. When they made their move, I'd trigger the panic button and Kurt's team would apprehend them while simultaneously raiding the auction house headquarters with enough evidence to arrest everyone involved. Simple.
Terrifying.
Absolutely the kind of plan that could go catastrophically wrong if even one element failed. Remember, Helena said, adjusting my formal gown, you're Luna Queen Vivian attending a charity gala. Confident, poised, completely unaware that criminals are targeting you. Don't look nervous or they'll suspect a trap. How do I look confident when I'm terrified? You channel the same energy you used when negotiating with your grandfather's lawyers. Business confidence, not personal confidence. That's your natural state anyway. Helena stepped back, assessing. You look perfect. Regal, expensive, exactly like someone criminals would want to eliminate. That's not as reassuring as you think it is. The gala was being held at a hotel in the city, neutral territory where both legitimate nobility and criminal operatives could mingle without drawing attention. I arrived in royal convoy, guards escorting me through the entrance before melting into the crowd to provide discreet surveillance. Kurt wasn't there. He was coordinating the operation from the mobile command center, watching through multiple camera feeds and ready to intervene the moment I signaled. But I could feel his presence through our bond, his anxiety and determination mixing with my own fear. Luna Queen Vivian, a familiar voice said, and I turned to find Lord Revan approaching with his characteristic false smile. How delightful to see you at tonight's event. I wasn't aware you'd be attending. Last-minute decision. The charity seemed worthy of royal support. I kept my voice steady despite recognizing Revan as one of the primary suspects. Lord Revan, I trust you've been well since the kingdom function? Quite well. Though I've been hearing disturbing rumors about your husband. Revan's tone was casual, but his eyes were calculating. Rumors that he's not quite who he claims to be. That perhaps your marriage is more complicated than it appears. People always have opinions about royal marriages. I've learned to ignore baseless speculation. I sipped my champagne, projecting boredom. Was there something specific you wanted to discuss? Or are you just fishing for gossip? I'm always interested in truth, Luna Queen. Particularly when that truth involves Alpha King Kurt's unusual background and questionable activities. Revan leaned closer, his voice dropping. For instance, I'm curious about why the Alpha King was registered at the Bridgeport auction house under a false name. That seems like behavior worth investigating, don't you think? My blood ran cold, but I forced my expression to remain neutral. I have no idea what you're talking about. My husband and I met through traditional channels. If you've been told otherwise, you've been misinformed.
Have I?
Revan's smile widened. Because I have documentation suggesting Alpha King Kurt was sold at auction 3 months ago. Documentation that proves your marriage began as contracted arrangement to satisfy your grandfather's will. That's quite the scandal if true. It's not true. And spreading false rumors about the Alpha King is dangerous for your political standing. I started to turn away. If you'll excuse me. Revan's hand closed on my arm. Not aggressive enough to draw attention, but firm enough to keep me from leaving. I think you should come with me, Luna Queen. We have a private room where we can discuss this matter more thoroughly. Away from all these witnesses. This was it. The abduction attempt. Exactly what we'd been expecting. I pressed the panic button. Nothing happened. I pressed it again, harder, panic rising when no alarm sounded and no guards immediately converged. Looking for this? Revan held up a small device. Signal jammer. We suspected you might be wired. Standard precaution when dealing with investigations. Your guards can't hear you, your panic button won't work, and Alpha King Kurt has no idea I'm escorting you to a car that will take you somewhere far away from his protection. You're making a mistake, I said, trying to pull away without causing a scene. You can't just kidnap Luna Queen in the middle of a public event. I can if I'm clever about it, which I am. Revan's grip tightened, his other hand moving to my back like he was being gentlemanly while actually forcing me toward the exit. Walk with me, Luna Queen. Smile like we're having pleasant conversation. If you scream or try to resist, I'll kill everyone in this ballroom and blame the violence on rogue attacks. Your choice. I walked. Not because I believed his threat. Kurt's team was here somewhere, watching, waiting for the signal that hadn't come, but because getting Revan to take me to his vehicle meant leading him directly into whatever backup plan Kurt had prepared for signal failures. Outside, a black car waited with tinted windows and no visible license plates. Revan opened the door, pushing me inside with enough force that I stumbled. Drive, he told someone in the front seat. The warehouse on 5th. Make sure we're not followed. The car pulled away from the hotel, and through the bond one felt Kurt's sudden spike of alarm. He knew something was wrong, knew the plan had failed, and was presumably mobilizing every resource to find me. I just had to survive long enough for him to get there. The warehouse was exactly what every crime movie had taught me to expect. An abandoned building in an industrial district, minimal lighting, the kind of place where screaming wouldn't draw attention. Revan dragged me inside, where 3 other wolves waited, all of them looking at me with the kind of cold assessment that suggested they were calculating whether killing me immediately was easier than interrogation. Luna, Queen Vivian, one of them said, older female wolf who moved with authority that marked her as leader. We have questions about your husband's investigation into our operations. I don't know anything about investigations. I'm just his wife. Keep playing ignorant, keep them talking, give Kurt's team time to track the vehicle. You're Luna Queen married to the Alpha King who's been infiltrating our auction house for months. You expect us to believe you know nothing. The woman circled me like predator assessing prey. We're not stupid, Luna Queen. We know Alpha King Kurt went undercover as Kurt Walter. We know you purchased him at auction. We know he's been using your marriage as cover while gathering evidence to dismantle our network. The only question is how much you've been helping him. I haven't been helping anyone. I bought a husband to satisfy inheritance requirements. If he was undercover, he didn't tell me. Technically true, Kurt hadn't told me until I discovered the truth on my own. Lying won't help you. We've been monitoring your communications, tracking your movements. We know you've been working with his investigation team. The woman pulled out a knife, casual threat that made my pulse spike with fear. So, let's try this again. What evidence has Alpha King Kurt gathered? What does he know about our operations? How close is he to making arrests? I don't know. He doesn't discuss investigation details with me. That's unfortunate. Because we need that information, and you're our best source. The woman tested the knife's edge with her thumb. We can do this the easy way. You tell us everything, we kill you quickly, or the hard way, where we extract information slowly and painfully. Your choice. I'm Luna Queen. Killing me means declaring war on the Northern Territories. Alpha King Kurt will destroy everyone involved in my death. Alpha King Kurt will try. But by the time he finds your body, we'll be gone, disappeared with enough money from our operations to live comfortably in territories he can't touch. Your death just eliminates the evidence that we sold him at auction. The woman moved closer, the knife reflecting warehouse lights. Last chance, Luna Queen. Tell us what we want to know. I don't know anything useful. And even if I did, I wouldn't tell you.
Brave.
Stupid, but brave. The woman raised the knife. Hold her down. This is going to take a while. The other wolves moved to grab me, and I prepared to fight, Kurt's self-defense training ready to be tested against multiple opponents with nothing to lose. Then the warehouse doors exploded inward with enough force to send metal flying, and Alpha King Kurt entered like storm made flesh, power radiating from him in waves that forced every criminal to their knees in involuntary submission. "You touched my mate," Kurt said, his voice carrying absolute fury. "You threatened Luna, Queen Vivian. You attempted to murder someone under my direct protection. Those are acts of war against the Northern Territories." "Alpha King, we didn't. She's fine. We were just..." The woman's protests died when Kurt's dominance increased, making it hard for her to breathe. "You pulled a knife on my wife. You planned to torture her for information. You threatened to kill her slowly." Kurt's amber eyes were glowing with alpha power. "There's no talking your way out of this. You're all under arrest for attempted regicide, conspiracy to commit murder, and about 15 other charges my prosecutors will enumerate during your trials. Assuming I don't just execute you myself for daring to threaten what's mine." Guards poured through the broken doors. Kurt's team, law enforcement, armed wolves who secured the criminals with professional efficiency. Within minutes, everyone involved in my kidnapping was in custody and being read their rights. Kurt crossed to me, his dominance dropping to something more controlled as he pulled me into his arms. "Are you hurt?" "Did they?"
I'm okay.
"Scared but okay." They were just threatening, hadn't actually done anything yet. I was shaking, adrenaline crash hitting now that the immediate danger had passed. "How did you find me?" "The signal jammer blocked everything. I put a tracker in your bracelet that operates on a different frequency than the panic button. When the button didn't work, I activated the backup tracker and followed it here." Kurt's hands were gentle as he checked me for injuries. "I'm so sorry. The signal jammer was a contingency we didn't plan for. You were alone with them for too long. But you got here before anything permanent happened. The plan worked." I pulled back to look at him. "Did your team raid the auction house?" "Please tell me we got them all." "We got them all. Auction house shut down, records seized, every criminal involved in custody. It's over, Vivian. The investigation is done. The network is dismantled and you're safe." "We're safe," I corrected. "Both of us." "Both of us," Kurt agreed, pulling me close again and just holding me while law enforcement processed the crime scene around us. The aftermath took weeks to fully resolve. Trials for the auction house criminals, public revelation of Kurt's undercover operation, media coverage of the Luna Queen who'd been used as bait to catch them. And through it all, the question neither of us had explicitly addressed: what happened to our marriage now that the investigation was done? "We should probably talk about that," I said one evening while we were alone at the estate. "About whether we stay married now that you're not undercover anymore." "Do you want to stay married?" Kurt asked carefully. "I know the circumstances were complicated. I know I lied for months. You have every right to end this and go back to your life without me in it. Is that what you want? To end this?" "God, no. I want to stay married. Make this real. Spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of the trust you placed in me when you bought me at auction." Kurt took my hands. "But I also know you didn't sign up for being Luna Queen. You just wanted to save your family's estate. If you want out, I'll make sure you keep the inheritance and the divorce is as painless as possible. And if I want to stay?" I met his eyes. "If I want to try being your actual wife, your real Luna Queen, your partner in everything beyond just investigations and contracts, then I spend every day thanking the moon goddess that you're stubborn enough to forgive me despite my many flaws." Kurt smiled, genuine, hopeful expression that transformed his entire face. "I love you, Vivian. I loved you when you were just desperate woman who bought me at auction. I love you more now that I know you're brave enough to be bait, strong enough to survive kidnapping, and generous enough to still want me despite everything. If you'll have me, really have me, not as Kurt Walter or as contract arrangement, but as Kurt Thorne, your actual husband, I'll spend the rest of our lives making sure you never regret choosing me." "I already chose you." At the auction, when I bid everything I had because something about you felt right. That choice hasn't changed. It's just become more informed. I squeezed his hands. I love you too. Even though you lied, even though being Luna Queen is terrifying, even though our marriage started as the most ridiculous business transaction in history. I love you, and I want to try making this real. You're absolutely sure? Because there's no going back from this. Once we commit to real marriage, you're Luna Queen permanently. That's a lot to take on. I'm sure. I might not be perfect Luna Queen, might make mistakes and need constant help from Helena, might occasionally want to quit and just run the family business instead. But I'm sure about you, about us, about choosing to stay married to the man I accidentally bought at auction who turned out to be the Alpha King. Kurt kissed me, thorough, passionate kiss that promised everything we'd both been too scared to fully commit to before. Then let's do this properly. Real marriage, real partnership, real everything. No more contracts, no more pretending, just us figuring out our lives together. That sounds perfect. Terrifying and complicated and absolutely perfect. That's basically our relationship in a nutshell. Terrifying, complicated, and perfect. Exactly. Making our marriage public meant dealing with Damien's inevitable explosion when he discovered his cousin had not only secured the inheritance, but had done so by marrying the Alpha King. He's going to lose his mind, I told Kurt while we prepared for the press conference where we'd announced the truth about our relationship. Damien's been convinced our marriage was fraudulent. Learning I'm actually Luna Queen, and our marriage was genuine all along. That's going to destroy him. Let it destroy him. He's been harassing you for months, trying to steal your inheritance through legal manipulation. He deserves to be humiliated when he realizes his cousin outsmarted him. Kurt adjusted his formal attire, looking every inch the Alpha King rather than the purchased husband I'd brought home. Though I'll admit, I'm looking forward to his face when we make the announcement. You're terrible.
I'm protective.
There's a difference. The press conference was held at the Royal Palace, massive venue filled with journalists, nobles, and curious wolves who'd heard rumors about the Alpha King's unusual marriage but hadn't known the full story. Kurt spoke first, his Alpha King authority making everyone listen. 3 months ago, I went undercover to investigate criminal operations at the Bridgeport auction house. I registered myself as Kurt Walter, available for contract marriage, with the intention of being purchased by criminal operatives who I could then investigate from the inside. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The undercover operation had been mentioned in news coverage about the arrests, but most people hadn't realized the Alpha King had personally gone undercover. What I didn't anticipate, Kurt continued, was being purchased by Vivian Lopez, a woman who had no connection to the criminal network and simply needed a husband to satisfy her grandfather's will requirements. She paid $50,000 for what she believed was a contract marriage to a desperate man. She had no idea she'd bought the Alpha King. The murmurs became excited chatter. This was exactly the kind of story the media loved: royal intrigue, mistaken identity, accidental marriage to nobility. I chose to maintain my cover rather than immediately revealing my identity. I needed time to complete the investigation, and Vivian's estate provided perfect base of operations. I told myself I was being professional, that maintaining the deception served the kingdom's interests. Kurt's expression shifted to something more vulnerable. In reality, I was being selfish. Because for the first time in years, someone was treating me like a normal person rather than performing for the Alpha King. Vivian didn't know who I was, so she just treated me like Kurt, her purchased husband, her business partner, eventually her friend. It was the most genuine relationship I'd had in years, and I didn't want to end it by revealing the truth. Kurt turned to me, extending his hand in invitation. I stood and joined him at the podium, feeling every eye in the room assessing me. Vivian discovered my real identity 3 months into our marriage, Kurt continued, his hand steady on mine. She had every right to be furious about the deception. Instead, she chose to help with the investigation, eventually serving as bait to draw out the criminals who'd tried to eliminate us both. She risked her life to help dismantle a criminal network she had no obligation to fight. That's when I realized she wasn't just my cover identity or my contracted wife. She was my actual partner. Someone I wanted to stay married to, not because the contract required it, but because I'd fallen in love with her. The crowd was silent now, everyone focused on the Alpha King's public declaration. So today, I'm announcing that Vivian Lopez is not just my wife through contract or legal technicality. She's my chosen mate, my Luna Queen, and my partner in everything. What started as purchase marriage has become real partnership, and I'm asking her now, publicly, with the entire kingdom watching, to stay married to me. Not as business arrangement, not as convenient cover, but as my actual wife. He turned to face me fully, dropping to one knee in front of hundreds of witnesses. Vivian Lopez, will you marry me? Again, properly this time, with full knowledge of who I am and what being Luna Queen means. Will you choose me, knowing everything, and let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of the trust you placed in me that day at the auction? My throat was tight with emotion. You're asking me to marry you after we're already married? That's redundant. I'm asking you to choose me when you have all the information. The first time you chose me out of desperation. This time, I want you to choose me because you actually want to be married to me. I already told you I want to stay married. In private, where we didn't have audience. And now I'm asking you in public, where everyone can witness that you chose me freely. So, will you marry me, Vivian? Will you be my Luna Queen not because you bought me at auction, but because you want to build a life with me? I looked at the most powerful alpha in 5 kingdoms, kneeling before me in front of his entire court, offering everything he had despite knowing I could still refuse. Yes, I said clearly, making sure everyone heard. I'll marry you again. I'll be your Luna Queen. I'll build a life with you. Yes to all of it. Kurt stood, pulling me into his arms and kissing me in front of hundreds of witnesses. Public claim that was both romantic gesture and political statement. I was his Luna Queen, chosen and claimed before the entire kingdom. The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Journalists shouted questions we ignored in favor of just holding each other and processing that we'd actually done it, made our ridiculous marriage real. That was either very romantic or very manipulative, I said against his chest. Proposing in front of everyone so I couldn't refuse without causing diplomatic incident. I knew you wanted to say yes. I just wanted to give you the public proposal you deserved instead of the auction purchase you actually got. Kurt pulled back to look at me. Though if you're angry about the manipulation, I apologize. I'm not angry. I'm just noting that you're very good at grand gestures. I kissed him again, shorter this time. Now we have to do an actual wedding ceremony where I marry you knowing you're the Alpha King instead of thinking you're just purchased husband. That's going to be strange. Strange but genuine, which is better than most royal marriages manage. The actual wedding happened 2 months later, an elaborate royal ceremony that was nothing like our quiet civil marriage had been. This time there were thousands of guests, formal protocols, ceremonies that took hours. But at the center of it all was the same fundamental truth. I was choosing Kurt, he was choosing me, and we were building something real from the most absurd beginning possible. I can't believe I bought my husband at auction, I said during the reception, watching nobles who'd once dismissed me now treating me with careful respect as Luna Queen. This entire situation is insane. You've mentioned that approximately 50 times since we started planning this wedding. Kurt pulled me onto the dance floor, his arms settling into place with comfortable familiarity. Are you having regrets? About marrying you?
No.
About the fact that I'll be explaining to our future children that mommy bought daddy at auction like he was property?
Yes.
That's going to be an awkward conversation. We'll frame it as romantic story about fate bringing us together despite impossible circumstances. We'll frame it as cautionary tale about what happens when you're desperate and make questionable decisions that accidentally work out. Both versions are accurate. Damien appeared at the edge of the dance floor, looking like he'd been forced to attend under duress. Which he had. Refusing a royal wedding invitation was insulting enough to have political consequences, so he'd come despite clearly wanting to be anywhere else. "Cousin Vivian," he said with barely contained fury. Or should I say Luna Queen Vivian? "Congratulations on your fortuitous marriage." "Thank you, Damien. I appreciate you attending despite your obvious discomfort." I kept my tone pleasant despite knowing he was seething. "I trust you've dropped the lawsuits claiming my marriage was fraudulent, given that it's now very publicly real and sanctioned by both civil and royal law." "I've dropped them. Continuing would be pointless given your new status." Damien's jaw was tight. "Though I do wonder, did you know who he was when you bought him at auction? Was this entire situation a calculated deception designed to make me look foolish?" "I had no idea who Kurt was when I purchased him. I just knew I was desperate to save the family estate, and he seemed like my best option." I met Damien's eyes directly. "I got lucky. Sometimes desperate decisions work out better than planned ones. You should try it sometime, making choices based on genuine need rather than just greedy manipulation." "You stole my inheritance." "I saved the family legacy from someone who would have destroyed it for gambling money. There's a difference." My voice hardened. "Grandfather wrote that will because he knew you'd sell everything the moment you inherited. He gave me the chance to save it, and I did. If you're angry about that, be angry at yourself for being so obviously untrustworthy that even grandfather couldn't stand the thought of leaving you in charge." Damien looked like he wanted to argue, but you didn't argue with Luna Queen at her own wedding without committing social suicide. He bowed stiffly and retreated, defeated. "That was harsh," Kurt observed. "He spent months trying to steal everything I worked for. He deserves harsh." I leaned against Kurt's chest, letting him guide me through the dance. Is it wrong that I enjoyed watching him realize he'd lost? It's human. Satisfaction at deserved defeat is normal. Kurt's hand tightened on my waist. Though I should mention, I had his gambling debts investigated. He owes over $2 million to various creditors. Without the inheritance, he's financially destroyed. Good. Maybe bankruptcy will teach him something about consequences. Or he'll just become more desperate and dangerous. We should keep security tight around you for a while. Always with the overprotective security measures. You were kidnapped 6 weeks ago. I think continued security is justified. Fair point. The celebration continued late into the night. Dancing, toasts, elaborate meal that required using multiple forks exactly as Helena had trained me. By the time it ended, I was exhausted and ready to collapse. "One more thing before we can retreat to privacy," Kurt said, guiding me to where Helena waited with official documentation. "Luna Queen coronation ceremony. Quick formality to make your status official beyond just being my wife." "There's a separate coronation? Royal marriages require it. You're already Luna Queen by virtue of being married to me, but the formal coronation makes it official in kingdom records." Kurt smiled at my obvious exhaustion. "It's 5 minutes of Helena saying formal words and placing a crown on your head. Then we're done with ceremonies and can finally have actual privacy." The coronation was exactly as described. Brief ceremony where Helena spoke formal words about duty and service, then placed the Luna Queen's crown on my head while witnesses documented the moment for kingdom records. "Luna Queen Vivian Lopez Thorne," Helena announced formally. "Recognized and crowned, made to Alpha King Kurt, sovereign of the Northern Territories. May your reign be long and just." The witnesses applauded. Kurt kissed me again, becoming a pattern at this point, and I officially became Luna Queen in every legal and ceremonial sense. "Now can we have privacy?" asked Kurt hopefully. "Now we can have privacy. Our private suite, no interruptions, just us figuring out our marriage without investigation work or criminal conspiracies interfering." "That sounds perfect." We're treated to the royal suite Helena had prepared, luxurious rooms that were somehow more comfortable than intimidating, probably because Kurt had insisted on making them feel like home rather than like museum display. So, Kurt said once we were alone, pulling me into his arms, "We're actually married now. Really married, not just through contract or convenient arrangement. How does it feel?" Terrifying. Overwhelming. Absolutely right. I kissed him. "I love you. Even though you lied. Even though being Luna Queen is harder than anything I've ever done. Even though we started in the most absurd way possible. I love you, and I'm glad I bought you at that auction. I love you too. Thank you for being desperate enough to purchase a husband. Thank you for choosing me twice, once when you didn't know who I was, once when you did. Thank you for being brave enough to serve as bait, strong enough to survive kidnapping, and generous enough to forgive me despite my many failures. You're welcome. Though technically you're thanking me for buying you like property, which is still the weirdest foundation for marriage in history. We'll tell our children it was fate bringing us together through unusual circumstances. We'll tell our children their mother made questionable decision that accidentally worked out perfectly. Both versions work. Both versions are true. We spent the rest of the night just being together. No investigations, no criminals, no political pressures. Just Kurt and Vivian, figuring out their marriage and building something genuine from the most ridiculous beginning imaginable. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't simple. But it was ours. And that was more than enough. 6 months into being Luna Queen, I'd learned several important things. First, royal protocol was exhausting and required constant attention to avoid diplomatic incidents. Second, nobles were judgmental about everything, and I'd never please them all. Third, being married to Kurt was significantly easier than being Luna Queen, which suggested I'd married well even if the circumstances were absurd. "You're doing fine," Kurt said for the 100th time when I expressed doubts about my capabilities. The nobles are always critical of new Luna Queens. It's tradition. How encouraging. My inadequacy is traditional. Your learning curve is traditional. Your actual performance exceeds most new Luna Queens. Kurt pulled me away from the reports I'd been reviewing. "You've implemented 3 successful kingdom initiatives, navigated 2 diplomatic crises, and personally resolved a territory dispute that's been ongoing for 5 years. That's impressive for 6 months. I just applied basic business negotiation skills to kingdom problems. It's not revolutionary. It's exactly what this kingdom needed. Practical solutions instead of political posturing. You're better at this than you realize." Kurt guided me to the couch, sitting beside me with obvious concern. "But you're also exhausted. When's the last time you took a break?" "Breaks are for people who have everything under control. I'm still figuring out basic protocols." "You've mastered basic protocols. Helena says you're her most successful student. Now you're just being perfectionist about details that don't actually matter." Kurt's hand found mine. "Take a break, Vivian. The kingdom will survive if you're not working every moment." "Will it? Because I feel like the moment I stop watching everything, something will explode." "That's anxiety, not reality. You're allowed to rest." "I'll rest when I've proven I'm worthy of this position." "You've already proven that. Multiple times. To me, to Helena, to most of the nobles despite their traditional skepticism. The only person who still doubts you is you." Kurt pulled me closer. "What do you need? What would make being Luna Queen feel manageable instead of overwhelming?" "Honestly, I need to feel like I'm still Vivian Lopez sometimes instead of just Luna, Queen Vivian all the time. I miss running the family business, miss making decisions that are just mine instead of everything being about kingdom implications." "Then keep running the business. Be Vivian Lopez, who's also Luna Queen, instead of trying to erase one identity for the other." Kurt's suggestion was so simple I'd somehow missed it entirely. "You don't have to choose between being yourself and being my wife. You can be both. The nobles will say Luna Queens shouldn't be involved in commerce. The nobles say Luna Queens shouldn't do lots of things that you've already done successfully. Ignore them. Run your business, maintain your identity, and be Luna Queen on your own terms rather than according to their outdated expectations. Helena would have a heart attack if I told her I wanted to keep managing commercial operations. Helena would approve of you maintaining independence. She's been encouraging you to define Luna Queen role according to your strengths rather than just following tradition. Kurt stood, pulling me up with him. Come on, we're going to the estate. You're going to spend the afternoon managing your business and remembering who you were before you bought me at auction. Then, tonight we'll come back and deal with kingdom responsibilities. Balance, not erasure. That's either brilliant or irresponsible. It's practical. You can't be effective Luna Queen if you've lost yourself trying to meet everyone else's expectations. We spent the afternoon at the Lopez estate, me reviewing business operations with my managers while Kurt worked on kingdom matters from the study that had once been his room when he was purchased husband. It was comfortable, familiar, grounding in ways the palace rarely was. This feels good, I admitted over dinner. Being home, managing the business, feeling like Vivian Lopez instead of just performing Luna Queen role. Then we make this regular practice. Split time between palace and estate, between kingdom work and your business. You're allowed to maintain both identities. Kurt reached across the table. I married Vivian Lopez. I want her to still exist alongside Luna Queen Vivian. Even if that means I'm not available for every kingdom function? Even then, I can handle functions alone when necessary. What I can't handle is you losing yourself because you're trying to be perfect Luna Queen according to other people's standards. I love you. Have I mentioned that recently? Not in the last hour. I was starting to worry. I love you. Thank you for reminding me I'm allowed to still be myself. That's what husbands do. Even accidentally purchased ones. A year into our marriage, we held a celebration at the estate, not a formal royal event, just a gathering of friends, family, and wolves who'd been part of our journey. Helena attended, looking less stern than usual. The guards who'd protected me during the investigation. Saren, who'd become one of my closest advisors despite her rogue background. 1 year since you bought me at auction, Kurt said during his toast. 1 year of figuring out how to make the most absurd marriage in history actually work. 1 year of Vivian being brilliant Luna Queen while also remaining herself. I'm grateful for all of it. 1 year since I made the best questionable decision of my life, I added. Spending $50,000 on a husband I knew nothing about except that something felt right. Turns out my instincts were better than my planning. Your instincts bought you the Alpha King. That's impressively good intuition. Or impressively good luck. I haven't decided which. Both. Definitely both. The celebration continued with stories about the investigation, about my kidnapping and rescue, about the press conference where Kurt had proposed again in front of the entire kingdom. Everyone laughing about how ridiculous our origin story was, how unlikely our success had been. You two are going to be legendary, Saren said. The story about the Luna Queen who bought her husband at auction is going to be told for generations. I'm hoping they leave out the part where I treated the Alpha King like purchased help for 3 months, I said. That's the best part of the story. The powerful king pretending to be desperate man, the woman who had no idea who she bought. It's romantic in the most absurd way possible. Romanticism is generous. Ridiculous is more accurate. Romance is always ridiculous. You two just made it more obvious than most couples. Later, alone with Kurt, I reflected on how different my life was from what I'd expected when I'd attended that auction a year ago. Do you regret it? Kurt asked, clearly thinking along similar lines. The deception, the complications, everything that came with buying me? I regret that you lied for 3 months. I regret the kidnapping and the fear. I regret that becoming Luna Queen meant giving up privacy and dealing with constant scrutiny. I turned to face him. But I don't regret buying you. I don't regret choosing to stay married when I learned the truth. I don't regret building this life with you despite every complication. So net result, no regrets. Even knowing what you know now, that I'm overprotective, demanding about security, occasionally insufferable about kingdom business, you'd still choose me? Even knowing what I know now, that you're overprotective because you lost your sister, demanding about security because you've seen what happens when it fails, occasionally insufferable because you actually care about doing the job well, yes, I'd still choose you. Every time. Kurt pulled me close, his arms secure and warm. I love you. Thank you for being stubborn enough to forgive me and brave enough to become Luna Queen despite having no preparation for the role. I love you too. Thank you for being honest enough to admit you were wrong and patient enough to let me figure out being Luna Queen at my own pace. We're quite the pair. The Alpha King and the woman who bought him at auction. Most ridiculous royal couple in history. Most successful ridiculous couple in history. There's a difference.
True.
We're very good at making absurd situations work. That's our specialty. 5 years after buying Kurt at auction, we'd built something I couldn't have imagined during those desperate 3 days when I'd been frantically searching for a husband to satisfy my grandfather's will. The Lopez estate was thriving, business expanding under my continued management while Kurt handled kingdom responsibilities. We'd proven that Luna Queens could maintain commercial interests, that royal marriages could include independent identities, that tradition wasn't sacred when it prevented practical solutions. The Northern Territories had changed too. Kurt's investigation had exposed corruption that went beyond just the auction house, leading to reforms in how vulnerable wolves were protected throughout the kingdom. I'd been instrumental in those reforms, using my business experience to design practical systems that actually worked rather than just looking good on paper. And we'd started a family, twin daughters who were 2 years old and already demonstrating the stubbornness they'd inherited from both parents. They're terrorizing the staff, Helena reported with what might have been amusement. They've decided the palace guards are toys they can climb on. The guards are too afraid to stop them because they're princesses. I'll talk to them about appropriate treatment of palace guards, I said, trying not to laugh at the mental image. Though in fairness, Kurt taught them that guards are safe people, so climbing them seems like logical extension. Alpha King Kurt needs to be more specific in his safety lessons. Helena paused. Though I will admit, your daughters are considerably more independent than most royal children their age. That's your influence. Is that compliment or criticism? Both. They'll be terrors as teenagers, but effective leaders as adults. I'm planning for long-term rather than short-term convenience. That's very pragmatic of you. I learned from watching you be Luna Queen. Pragmatism over tradition, effectiveness over appearance. You've changed how this role functions. I just did what made sense instead of what was expected. That's exactly what I mean. You've redefined Luna Queen as a practical position rather than just a ceremonial one. Future Luna Queens will have more freedom because you proved the role could be flexible. That's a legacy I'm proud of. Much better than being remembered as that Luna Queen who bought her husband at auction. You'll be remembered as both. The practical Luna Queen who started as an absurd story and became actual inspiration. Helena smiled, rare expression that suggested genuine approval. You've done well, Luna Queen Vivian. Better than anyone expected when Alpha King Kurt first brought you to the palace. Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. After Helena left, I found Kurt in his study, reviewing reports that would never quite disappear despite how efficient his administration had become. The twins are climbing on guards again, I said, settling into the chair across from his desk. Helena says we need to be more specific about appropriate behavior. The guards don't mind. They find it entertaining. Kurt set down his work, giving me his full attention. Though I'll have a conversation with the girls about consent before climbing on people. Even guards. Good plan. We should probably also discuss the fact that they've figured out their princess status means they can manipulate servants into giving them extra desserts. That's just good political strategy. I'm impressed they learn negotiation skills so young. They learned from watching me negotiate with you about taking breaks from kingdom work. They're mimicking what they see. Then we're teaching them well. Negotiation is valuable skill. So is not abusing power over people who can't refuse you. We should probably emphasize that part. Fair point. Kurt stood, crossing to where I sat, and pulling me up into his arms. How are you doing? Really doing, not just managing everything. I'm good. Tired, overwhelmed by how fast the twins are growing, occasionally wondering how I ended up with this life. But genuinely good. I leaned against him. How about you? I'm content. I have made I love. Daughters who are going to conquer the world someday, kingdom that's functioning well, and investigation work that challenges me without requiring undercover operations. That's more than I thought I'd have 5 years ago. 5 years since I bought you at auction for $50,000. Best investment you ever made. Most terrifying investment I ever made. Best decision despite the terror. That's basically our entire relationship. Terrifying decisions that work out better than expected. We stood together in comfortable silence, 5 years of marriage and 2 children later, and I marveled at how different my life was from what I'd expected that desperate day at the Bridgeport auction house. I'd thought I was buying a convenient husband to satisfy legal requirements. I'd actually been choosing my mate, my partner, and the father of my children. I'd thought I was making desperate compromise. I'd actually been making the best decision of my life. Do you think about it? I asked Kurt quietly. About how we started. About the auction and the lies and everything that came after. All the time. I think about how terrified you looked when you were bidding, how you chose me despite knowing nothing about me except that something felt right. I think about how you treated me like Kurt instead of like the Alpha King, how you forgave me despite the deception, how you were brave enough to be bait when criminals tried to eliminate us. Kurt's arms tightened around me. I think about how lucky I am that you were desperate enough to attend that auction, that you bid everything you had, that you chose me over all the other men who were available. Best $50,000 anyone ever spent. I should have negotiated a better rate. $50,000 for the Alpha King was vastly underpriced. You got what you paid for. Husband who loves you, partner who supports you, mate who'll spend the rest of his life making sure you never regret choosing him. That's significantly more than I paid for. Then consider it bonus compensation for putting up with 3 months of lies and 5 years of my overprotective security measures. When you frame it that way, I'm definitely getting a good deal. That's what I keep telling you. Our daughters found us then, Mira and Stella, already running despite being only 2, already demanding attention with a kind of persistence that suggested they'd inherited both parents' stubbornness.
Mama, Papa.
Guards said we can't climb them anymore. Mira complained, her indignation obvious. But they're fun to climb. The guards are people, not playground equipment, I explained, kneeling to her level. You need to ask permission before climbing on anyone. That's about consent and respect. What's consent? It means asking if something's okay before you do it. Like, can I hug you? That's me asking consent for a hug. Yes, you can hug me. Mira launched herself at me with typical enthusiasm. Kurt scooped up Stella, who'd been watching the exchange with calculating expression that suggested she was figuring out how to weaponize consent rules to her advantage. You're plotting something, Kurt observed. I can see it in your face. You're definitely my daughter. I'm plotting how to get extra desserts by asking consent properly, Stella said with perfect 2-year-old logic. If I ask permission, you have to say yes, right? That's not how consent works. Nice try, though. I'll figure out eventually. I don't doubt it. You're terrifyingly smart for a 2-year-old. We spent the rest of the evening with our daughters, playing, reading stories, eventually convincing them to sleep through a combination of persistence and parental exhaustion. By the time they were finally asleep, Kurt and I collapsed in our own room. They're going to be handful as teenagers, I observed. They're already manipulative and they can barely speak in full sentences. They're going to be incredible as adults. Leaders who are smart, strategic, and confident enough to challenge authority when necessary. Kurt pulled me close. They'll be like their mother, Capable of anything, stubborn enough to attempt the impossible, brave enough to succeed despite everyone's doubts. You give me too much credit. I'm just a woman who got lucky when she bought a husband at auction. You're a woman who made a brave choice when she was desperate, who survived kidnapping and criminal conspiracies, who became Luna Queen despite having no preparation, who's raised 2 daughters while managing a business and helping run a kingdom. That's not luck. That's exceptional. It's a necessity. I just did what had to be done. That's what makes it exceptional. You don't see your own strength because you're too busy using it. I kissed him, tired but genuine kiss that promised I'd never take him for granted, that I'd always remember how lucky I was to have chosen him at that auction 5 years ago. I love you, I said against his lips. Thank you for being worth $50,000. I love you too. Thank you for being desperate enough to spend it. Most romantic thing you've ever said to me. I try. 10 years later. The auction house had been shut down for a decade, the criminals long since prosecuted and imprisoned. The building itself had been repurposed, turned into a resource center for wolves recovering from trafficking and exploitation, funded by the royal family and managed by survivors who understood what recovery required. I stood in front of the building with Kurt, remembering the desperate day when I'd walked through those doors with $50,000 and no idea my life was about to change completely. Strange being back here, Kurt observed. Last time I was in this building, I was pretending to be merchandise someone could purchase. Last time I was in this building, I was convinced I was making a terrible decision that would somehow save my inheritance. I squeezed his hand. Turns out we were both wrong about what that day meant. Were we? You did save your inheritance. You just also accidentally bought the Alpha King in the process. Details. The important part is that terrible decision became best decision. We were there for the Resource Center's 10th anniversary, ceremony honoring survivors who'd escaped trafficking, celebrating the reforms that had made escape and recovery more possible. Our daughters were with us, 12 years old now, poised and confident, and already showing signs they'd be formidable leaders someday. Mama, is it true you bought Papa at auction? Stella asked for the 100th time, still fascinated by the story despite hearing it repeatedly. Like, actually paid money to own him? Technically, I paid money for him to marry me. It was contract arrangement, not actual ownership. I'd learned to explain this carefully to avoid giving them ideas about buying people. It was a desperate solution to a complicated problem, not something I'd recommend as a general life strategy. But it worked out. You got Papa and became Luna Queen. Mira was more pragmatic about the whole thing. That's a good return on investment. That's one way to describe it. Romantic is probably better phrasing. Romance is inefficient. Investment analysis is more accurate. You're definitely my daughter. Too practical for your own good. The ceremony was moving, survivors sharing their stories, staff explaining the resources available, advocates celebrating the legal reforms that had made places like this possible. And throughout all of it, the recurring theme: change was possible. Recovery was possible. Desperate situations didn't have to define entire lives. That's our legacy, Kurt said quietly. Not just shutting down one criminal operation, but building systems that prevent others from rising. Creating resources for survivors. Changing laws to protect vulnerable wolves. That's what that desperate day 10 years ago ultimately accomplished. We accomplished it, I corrected. Not just you investigating, not just me surviving kidnapping. Together, building something better from terrible circumstances. Together, Kurt agreed. Always together. After the ceremony, we returned to the estate, not the palace, but the Lopez estate that had started everything. The business had expanded significantly over the decade, but the core remained the same. 3 generations of family legacy, now secure for the 4th generation represented by our daughters. Do you ever regret it? I asked Kurt that evening, watching the sunset from the same porch where I'd stood 10 years ago wondering if buying a husband at auction was actually going to work. Maintaining the deception? Using our marriage as investigation cover? All the complications that followed.
Never.
What we built from those complications is worth every difficult moment. Kurt pulled me close. I regret lying to you. I regret that you were kidnapped because of my investigation. I regret every moment of fear and danger you faced because of my choices. But I don't regret the outcome. Our marriage, our daughters, the life we've built together. Good. Because I spent $50,000 on you, and I'd like to think I got my money's worth. You got Alpha King, Luna Queen status, 2 exceptional daughters, and partner who loves you more than anything in 5 kingdoms. I'd say you got significantly more than $50,000 worth of value.
Agreed.
Though I'm still slightly horrified that I bought my husband at auction like he was property for sale. And I'm still slightly horrified that I lied to you for 3 months while using your marriage as investigation cover. We're even on the mutual horror scale. Fair assessment. Our daughters joined us on the porch, Mira and Stella already arguing about something with the intensity that suggested they'd inherited both parents' stubbornness and neither parent's patience. Mama, tell Stella she's wrong about succession law, Mira demanded. The eldest twin inherits first, which means I'm going to be Alpha Queen. The more capable twin should inherit, Stella countered. Which means we need objective assessment of our abilities before making succession decisions. You're both 12, Kurt said with obvious amusement. You have years before succession becomes relevant. Maybe wait until you're older to argue about who rules the kingdom. We're planning ahead. That's strategic thinking. Mira looked at me. Mama, you planned your inheritance strategy years in advance. That's why you were prepared when Grandpa's will tried to force you into desperate marriage. That's not. I didn't plan to buy a husband at auction. That was improvisation born from desperation, not strategic planning. But it worked, which means it was good strategy, regardless of whether it was planned or improvised. Stella's logic was frustratingly sound. We're learning from your example. When desperate situations arise, make bold choices that might work instead of giving up. That's either the best lesson or the worst lesson I could possibly teach you. I looked at Kurt helplessly. Are we raising them right? Or are we teaching them that desperate choices are good life strategy? We're teaching them that giving up isn't an option, that bold choices sometimes work, and that the most ridiculous plans occasionally succeed beyond expectations. Those are valuable lessons. Kurt's smile suggested he was entertained by our daughter's logical extensions of our own choices. They'll be fine.
Probably.
Maybe. That's not reassuring. Parenting rarely is. We spent the evening together as family, the same way we'd spent hundreds of evenings over the past decade. Talking, laughing, occasionally arguing about succession law because our daughters had inherited both parents' love of debate. Later, alone with Kurt, I reflected on how impossible this life would have seemed 10 years ago when I'd been desperately searching for a husband to satisfy my grandfather's will. I love you, I told him, the words as true as they'd been at every other moment over the past decade. Thank you for being the best terrible decision I ever made. I love you too. Thank you for being desperate enough to buy me at auction. Kurt kissed me gently. Here's to another 10 years of making absurd situations work. To another 10 years of terrifying decisions that succeed beyond expectations. To us, the most ridiculous royal couple in history who somehow became the most successful. To us. We'd started with $50,000, 3 desperate days, and an auction where I'd bought what I thought was a convenient husband. We'd built a marriage, a family, and a legacy that proved love could come from the most unlikely circumstances. The woman who'd been desperate enough to buy a husband had become Luna Queen who'd changed a kingdom. The Alpha King who'd been pretending to be merchandise had found genuine partnership with someone who'd chosen him before knowing his worth. And together, we'd proven that sometimes the most terrifying decisions led to the most beautiful outcomes.
10 years down.
Lifetime to go. And I wouldn't change a single moment of the ridiculous journey that had brought us here. And that's the complete story. Vivian bought a husband at auction for $50,000 and accidentally purchased the Alpha King. Kurt went undercover and decided playing her purchased husband was more fun than revealing he's worth $500 million. Together they dismantled criminal networks, survived kidnapping, fell in love, and built a legendary marriage from the most ridiculous circumstances possible. Vivian buying Kurt at auction with her last $50,000. Kurt maintaining the deception because she treated him like a person. The discovery scene when Vivian learned the truth. Vivian serving as bait to catch the criminals. Kurt's public proposal in front of the entire kingdom. The twins learning their mother bought their father at auction. 10 years later reflecting on the absurd beginning. What was your favorite moment? The auction purchase? The identity reveal? The kidnapping rescue? The public proposal? Drop your favorites in the comments. Smash that like button if you loved this story of desperate choices becoming perfect outcomes. Subscribe for more romance with mistaken identities, undercover kings, and proof that the most terrifying decisions sometimes lead to the most beautiful lives. Thanks for following Vivian and Kurt's journey from auction house to royal legacy. Remember, sometimes the best investments are the ones that seem completely insane at the time. See you in the next story with more accidental royal marriages, more identity reveals, and definitely more proof that desperate decisions can work out perfectly.